They're also the leading political opposition to you. Is that why they have been outlawed?
Oh my God, about the 60 Minutes interview, that was awful.
You have a well-funded propaganda effort, and then you have a willing group of people here in the United States that will support that.
Welcome to this special edition of One American News Investigates, a smear campaign against Egypt's el-Sisi. You decide. Recently, 60 Minutes, the iconic CBS News program, aired a segment by correspondent Scott Paley on the president of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and his government. Now, broadly speaking, the segment was a reckless attack on the president of Egypt and a defense of the Islamist terror organization which el-Sisi had overthrown, the infamous Muslim Brotherhood. Now, why was an American news organization promoting an Islamic supremacist organization like the Muslim Brotherhood while attacking the leader of that country? Well, One American News wanted to find out more.
The extremists, as he calls them, made up Egypt's largest political party, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is controversial. Its stated goal is peaceful pursuit of Islamic government, but over its 90 years, members have committed violence. In 2013, el-Sisi outlawed the brothers as terrorists. But President Trump hasn't designated them a terrorist organization, nor did President Obama when Andrew Miller was Egypt director in the National Security Council.
Who killed Anwar Sadat? It was the Muslim Brotherhood. Who got involved in the major attempts and successful terrorist attempts in the region? The Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood are on the record of saying that they will not keep Egypt stable unless they rule.
Oh my God, about the 60 Minutes interview, that was awful. I really think, I work in the journalism field, as you know, and I think it was very shameful to see such a double standard, unfair, and I don't want to call it an interview. I actually call it a trial. Scott had put the president of Egypt on trial.
Do you have a good idea of how many political prisoners you're holding? They're also the leading political opposition to you. Is that why they have been outlawed? Mr. President, I've spoken to a number of your countrymen who refuse to call you Mr. President because they say you're a military dictator.
But the questions were not questions, they were allegations, and the way it was portrayed, you just want him to look bad. And it's awful because the president answered all the questions to the best of his knowledge, and the interviewer, the presenter, came back to the same questions over and over and over, and just tried to have him incriminate himself or admit for something that he's never done.
I have a lot of backing. A lot of other places, other countries provide support for their activities. So they've got a well-funded effort, and they're used to doing propaganda. So they know how to put it out, and there is within the mainstream media here in the United States, you even see support for those types of things, because out of the previous administration, that was one of their policies, was that the Muslim Brotherhood was the Arab Spring, a good thing, something that should be supported. So you still see remnants of that carrying over into today.
60 Minutes calling the Muslim Brotherhood controversial is an understatement, and the Muslim Brotherhood's history contradicts its stated goal of peaceful pursuit of Islamic government.
The Muslim Brotherhood was founded back in 1928 in Egypt, and for almost all of that time used violence specifically as one of its topics, and has long been attacking, for example, the Coptic Christian groups and churches in Egypt. And in fact, today there have been attacks reported again that are mostly being promoted by the Muslim Brotherhood.
In fact, Freedom House, a nonprofit that conducts research and advocacy on democracy, political freedom, and human rights, compiled a list of human rights violations that was committed under Mohamed Morsi's watch alone. However, Johnson says that the Muslim Brotherhood have many different factions that work for them, allowing them to function as an umbrella organization.
It's an umbrella organization with the Muslim Brotherhood at the top, and underneath them they have different factions that work for them. For example, Hamas. Hamas was designated as a terrorist group back in 1995 by President Clinton, and then again in 97 by Madeleine Albright, who was then Secretary of State. So long established as a terrorist organization. Hamas openly declares himself to be a part of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. So there's definitely organizations that are back, and also in the first bombing of the Trade Center, the one that did not succeed with the truck bomb down in the parking garage, that was also partially funded by Muslim Brotherhood. So long worldwide reach, for decades involved in violence and terrorist acts and so on. So they're still active in those areas, but through their umbrella organization, using factions in different areas to carry out these attacks.
According to Johnson, spreading Sharia law and eliminating Western values is the Muslim Brotherhood's true goal.
They openly state what they represent. They want to impose Sharia law and eliminate Western values. So, I mean, they are a dedicated enemy to the West and openly state so.
Their vision is nothing else except power. They use religion to provide the legitimacy, but they have nothing to do with Islam or Muslims. As a matter of fact, when they act in their terrorist activity, they are going totally against the religion. However, by using a religion, you are able to create a legitimacy which is quite false.
The Muslim Brotherhood has already been banned in Egypt as a terrorist organization. But in a recent 60 Minutes interview, host Scott Paley attacked Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's crackdown on the organization, using interviews with Muslim Brotherhood members and a former Obama official to prove his point.
While individual Muslim brothers clearly have resorted to violence, many have left the party before doing so, precisely because they're discontent with the peaceful, gradualist approach of the senior Muslim Brotherhood leadership, because he views any opposition to him as a threat to his standing and as a threat to his objective. We have to remember he is a military officer. He spent his entire career in the military before he became president, and the idea that someone wouldn't obey or listen to his orders is anathema to him.
The other people that talked up to the president was Andrew Miller, which we all know, his thinking and his the way he thinks of Egypt.
Andrew Miller was the director for Egypt and Israel military issues for Obama's National Security Council. The organization enjoyed a very friendly relationship with that administration.
They dealt with them. They recognized them. They worked with them. They brought them into their fold. They met with people in the State Department. The National Security Advisor of the Muslim Brotherhood met with President Obama in the White House.
In the Oval Office, no less, for 45 minutes total alone with the president, during which time no notes were taken. A very unusual situation, according to Gabur.
Very unusual, and there was no statement.
We have found out in the last several years that there was a secret Obama directive, PSD 11, and it still remains classified. Why? I'm not sure. I think the Trump administration should declassify it. But it basically said that it's in the U.S. best interest to promote democratic movements in the Middle East. And they knew what they were talking about by saying that. They were talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. They were talking about indigenous Islamist movements over there. And I think that they started to, these Islamist groups over there started to see that there would be some receptive, some positive reception from the Obama administration. So they went for it. And you had then the Muslim Brotherhood Supreme Guide in around the end of 2010 declare war on the United States and say that the revolution is coming. And subsequently, you had the Arab Spring that the Brotherhood was very much a part of and benefited from.
But the Obama administration embraced the Muslim Brotherhood despite its stated hatred for the U.S. and its Western values. Even having then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton publicly announced U.S. support for Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood.
The United States welcomes the agreement today for a ceasefire in Gaza. For it to hold, the rocket attacks must end, a broader calm return. The people of this region deserve the chance to live free from fear and violence, and today's agreement is a step in the right direction that we should build on. Now we have to focus on reaching a durable outcome that promotes regional stability and advances the security, dignity, and legitimate aspirations of Palestinians and Israelis alike.
Remember a background to this whole meeting. When the Muslim Brotherhood ruled Egypt, they tried to change the identity of Egypt in many ways. And one of the key things that they did is they encouraged Hamas, which is basically an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, to rocket Israel. And that's what happened. And when the United States President Obama asked Morsi to intervene to stop Hamas from rocketing, which he did, and therefore he was regarded as a hero. And Secretary Clinton flew to Egypt. And at that time, Secretary Clinton, in a press statement, praised Morsi and stated very clearly that the United States was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood.
So let me clarify, Morsi was involved with the Muslim Brotherhood. They made this plan to use Hamas to bomb Israel just to be the ones to stop it, to get praise from the Obama White House and Clinton as Secretary of State.
That is correct.
Garber says that the strike on Israel by Hamas was encouraged by Morsi and the Brotherhood in Egypt, but that the Obama administration fell for the ruse.
All this time, the Obama administration was really kind of embracing them. Their ambassador to Egypt, Ann Patterson, is still today the most hated woman in Egypt by Egyptians because of her embrace of Morsi and the Brotherhood. I mean, they had open communications there, and I think the Obama folks believed that sort of the true expression, the true political expression in the Middle East would be Islamism. And they thought they bought all the nonsense for decades about how the Brotherhood is reformed and the Brotherhood really, it's a peaceful, as John Brennan said, a secular movement, which is completely absurd. But they thought that it would bring justice to the Middle East because, hey, these guys hate us. And we've been terrible for so many decades, so maybe they have a point in hating us.
Despite the Obama administration's public embrace of the Muslim Brotherhood, 30 million Egyptians protested against Morsi, standing for 3 days, saying, "Leave," the largest human protest in history, according to the BBC. The recent 60 Minutes interview painted Egyptian President el-Sisi as a repeated human rights abuser operating as a dictator, while failing to mention el-Sisi's reforms, allowing for more religious freedom in the predominantly Muslim country.
If you want to address human rights, the best place to start is with religious freedom. That's the first fundamental human right.
President el-Sisi recently unveiled the largest Christian cathedral in the Middle East on the Coptic Christmas Day, receiving support for the move from President Trump in a tweet. A move that Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, a Christian conservative policy and lobbying organization, says is a step in the right direction.
I believe President Sisi is making some moves in the right direction. 2 very elaborate centers of worship were constructed in the last 18 months, a mosque and the largest cathedral in the Middle East, both dedicated on the same day, sending a message. And the president, in his messages, I was there for both, making very clear that they were united as Egyptians, regardless of their faith background.
He opened up the biggest cathedral in the Middle East with the presence of Pope Tewodros, the Coptic Pope, and it's a great thing. These are messages to the whole world, and not only to the Egyptians, that Egypt has been transforming into a real democratic country, and there's a lot of room for other people to live and let live.
However, that cathedral is already coming under attack.
There was just a large Coptic cathedral that was opened in Egypt, which is a very interesting move for Egypt to see that come through. And then now it's already being attacked. And as I said, mainly this is driven by the Muslim Brotherhood.
In the 60 Minutes piece, Pelley doesn't touch on such violent acts committed by the organization, instead portraying Muslim Brotherhood members as victims, repeatedly asking el-Sisi if he was aware of all of the political prisoners being held in Egypt, asking el-Sisi if they had been outlawed because they opposed his presidency.
The Egyptian people rejected such a strict religious government. It is the right of the Egyptian people to choose the form of government they like.
They're also the leading political opposition to you. Is that why they have been outlawed?
No. We are only dealing with extreme Islamists who are carrying weapons. We would welcome them to live among the people, but we don't want them to carry weapons and destroy the Egyptian economy.
We know that the Muslim Brotherhood is very influential today. They try to hook up with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Danny Danon is the Israeli ambassador to the UN. Israel and Egypt have had its share of conflict between the two nations, but are currently working together to combat terrorism in the region.
For us, it's dangerous because we saw weapons coming from Egypt into Gaza, and the other way, terror activities that were produced in Gaza came back into Egypt.
Would you say that this is the deepest and closest cooperation that you've ever had with Israel?
That is correct.
It serves their interest and our interest because we don't want to see terrorists in the Sinai Peninsula, because eventually they will team up with radicals in Gaza and it will affect Israel.
Throughout the interview, President el-Sisi defends himself, saying he is simply fighting terrorism. The Egyptian president also defending the right to do so in a speech at the World Youth Forum, calling it a human right.
There was 33 million people out in the streets trying to oust Morsi and his regime, the Muslim Brotherhood. The President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was always trying to set one rule to the whole world and say that we don't want terrorism. We want to get rid of the terrorists. And he has been actively working towards that.
Egypt is the cornerstone of stability and security in the whole region, 100 million people. So if Egypt falls that in their hands, then we have a very, very serious situation.
Despite the media's more sympathetic coverage of the Muslim Brotherhood and efforts by the Obama administration to normalize the group in U.S. relations, many in the U.S. are still calling for the Trump administration to officially designate the group as a terrorist organization.
I believe that President Trump has mentioned that many times, and I wonder, I have some thoughts why this is not being done yet, because of all the bad deals that were cut with the previous administration, which would put the previous American administration at stake. So I hope we can announce them a terrorist group as soon as possible.
Often critical of the Muslim Brotherhood on the campaign trail, the president's administration was said to be considering taking such action early in the administration. But that action has yet to be realized.
And I really think they should be banned from the U.S. And I think that we should investigate their financial records. We see who's supporting them, because and we know a lot about this group, but unfortunately, I don't think enough steps had been taken to declare them as a terrorist organization.
The Muslim Brotherhood's strategy of operating as an umbrella organization with different branches has allowed it to elude a terrorist designation, with many foreign policy experts saying it is simply too diffuse and diverse to characterize, and it cannot be said as a whole to engage in terrorism that threatens the United States, but not everyone agrees with that characterization.
There are a number of congressmen that have recognized this and put together a bill. But the understanding of the matter is not there yet.
Senator Ted Cruz from Texas being one such lawmaker looking to pass legislation designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Gauber says part of the problem comes back to the media and the messaging surrounding the Brotherhood.
They are people that are advocating for them in think tanks, in universities, in the media, and that needs to be recognized. And I hope not only Washington recognizes that, but across the United States, because it is an extremely dangerous venture to keep a blind eye to something that is growing within the US and other countries in Europe and in the Middle East.
As a fellow Egyptian, Dr. Morgan agrees.
I think the U.S. Should listen more to the real, true news that comes from Egypt and not get it from other platforms that they twist all the facts. I think the U.S. should appreciate what Egypt has been doing for the U.S. Over the years. I think the relationship at this point is great. I think we just need to reinforce it and make it more richer. I think the U.S. should allow better channels of communications with the Egyptian authorities.
Both Reboy and Gauber warn against the growing presence of the Muslim Brotherhood in the Western world.
I fear that up till today, that there are just a small number of people who are able to understand and appreciate the dangerous mission that the Brotherhood has. They are already in the United States. Remember something, Morsi was recruited in California, and therefore there are cells in the United States.
It thrives, though, in the United States, and it thrives in Western Europe specifically, where a lot of these folks have fled. And that's nothing new for the Brotherhood, because throughout its history they've been banned in different places, mostly in Egypt, and they've had to flee several times. So they take root in different countries that are more hospitable. Now they're taking root in the West.
Dr. Morgan saying that el-Sisi's stance against the Brotherhood has been good for the region.
I think he's trying very hard to change the concept of and the way of people living in Egypt, in terms of trying to get people to live equally and try to have equal rights as much as he possibly can in that short period of time. The foreign policy file for Egypt has been great.
And el-Sisi's policy against terrorism is something neighboring countries appreciate, according to Dannon.
Today in the Middle East, you have players that support terrorism, engage with terrorists like Iran, who funds most terrorism in the region, and you have actors who fight terrorism. Egypt is fighting terrorism, and we appreciate that.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with President el-Sisi in Cairo during his tour in the Middle East. El-Sisi is still calling on the United States to also designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. When asked by One American News if the Trump administration is considering possibly doing so, a State Department spokesman said the department does not discuss deliberations or potential deliberations regarding its designations process. Many in the U.S. and abroad agree with President el-Sisi's calls to do so and say that perhaps now is the time to do just that with President Donald Trump in office. Thank you for joining us for a special edition of One American News Investigates. I'm Emerald Robinson.
We can use your help. Call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call today.